You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, I want to turn your attention to this statement that was made and released by Trump.
Sometimes it's not good to be rich. I just posted a $91 million bond, 91 million, on a fake story, totally made up story. Think of it, 91 million. I could say things about what it would cost normally. 91 million. Based on false accusations made about me by a woman that I knew nothing about, didn't know, never heard of. I know nothing about her. She wrote a book, she said things. And when I denied it, I said, it's so crazy, it's false. I got sued for defamation. That's where it starts.
So that seems to be pretty damn similar to two defamatory statements that Trump made that already cost him $5 million and then $83.3 million. Do you agree with that? Is this in the realm of yet another defamatory statement against E Jean Carroll by Trump?
You know, Ms. Carroll and her lawyers could easily bring a third lawsuit for defamation, and it would be like shooting fish in a barrel. Donald Trump would be found liable, and the only question is, where do you go with punitive damages to punish and deter somebody who seems to be, unwilling to be deterred, right? And I wouldn't say, Brian, that Donald Trump can't help himself. I would say Donald Trump chooses not to change his course of conduct. He knows full well what he's doing. He knows what two other juries have found him liable for, defaming E Jean Carroll, but he chooses to do it all over again. Why? Well, because he's an aspiring dictator, and he still believes that the laws shouldn't apply to him, that jury results shouldn't apply to him. And I do think if he's delusional at all, it's in the sense that he thinks he's going to be able to wiggle out of liability for all of this. But Brian, what did he do? On the very day he was made to post a bond of more than $90 million for defaming E Jean Carroll previously, he goes out and defames her again. And Roberta Kaplan, E Jean Carroll's lawyers, has already gone on record as saying, we are considering bringing another defamation suit. So, listen, as far as I'm concerned, let Donald Trump defame her ad nauseum. In other words, until he makes us all sick over and over and over again, and let E Jean Carroll continue to take him for every penny he's worth.
To your point on that, he also said in that very statement, he was explaining that he had to post that bond for $91 million. So it's not like he wasn't aware of the consequences of what he would then go on to say, because in that same sentence, he explains what the consequences were. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the amount of damages. If you figure out what the difference or the percent increase from $5 million to $83 million is, it's about a 1,500% increase. If that same increase, if that proportionate increase was imposed on the $83 million, that would put the next penalty at $1.4 billion. So can you talk about that for a moment? Are these penalties, I mean, that seems like an exorbitant amount, but then again, defaming somebody 3 times in a row and $90 million not being able to cut it seems ridiculous unto itself. So can you talk about what happens when, in terms of the proportionality of these penalties kind of stacking on each other, and how a court and a jury might look into this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You don't necessarily pull out a calculator and do it by the numbers. The first one was a $5 million judgment. Then it was an $83.3 million judgment. So, it needs to go up exponentially. But I do think that's relevant in the calculation of whether Ms. Carroll and her lawyers decide they want to go through the endeavor again of suing him again, winning again, trying to collect again. Because let's face it, Donald Trump already has a nearly $500 million judgment that he has to put up a bond for in about a week and a half. That's the New York fraud trial that he lost in spectacular fashion. So, E Jean Carroll and her lawyers might pursue another remedy. What might that other remedy be? They could go to the judge and they could ask for the judge to issue essentially a gag order or an injunction, just like, remember how Rudy Giuliani, after he was found liable to the tune of more than $100 million for defaming those 2 Georgia state election workers, Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, and Rudy kept running out on the courthouse steps and continuing to defame them, they applied for an injunction, asking the court to to shut Rudy's mouth. Rather than us having to continue to sue him, what we want is for the court to order him to stop defaming us. And if he defames us, he could potentially be held in contempt of court and possibly imprisoned. So that may be an alternate route for E Jean Carroll and her lawyers to pursue if they decide they don't want to go through yet another trial, even though it looks like on the merits, they are very likely to win the third trial for Donald Trump for defaming her.
Well, to that point, is there any reason why E Jean Carroll wouldn't proceed to a third trial if this thing is basically paint by numbers?
You know, do you really want to live your life in a courtroom or in the run up to yet another trial, which would be set many months off into the future? I mean, she already is going to have to wait for the money to start rolling in, because as of right now, Donald Trump has put up the money or put up a bond sufficient to hold off having to pay out on the judgments, the $5 million and the $83 million, while he appeals those judgments. So it's going to take some time for those cases to work their way through the federal appellate court system in New York before E Jean Carroll will actually begin to see that money. She will, but it could take 6 months. It could take a year. And I think the question can fairly be asked, do you really want to get on the front end of an endeavor that you may very well win, but it could be several years down the road before you see Donald Trump having to pay out in the event he loses a third time? So these are the kind of decisions that E Jean Carroll, together with her lawyers, will make. And, it's really up to them how much of this they want to put themselves through again.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you were asking me and there was at least $100 million at the end of that rainbow, I think personally I would be happy to endeavor in that in that whole process again. But to your point, we'll see what E Jean Carroll and Roberta Kaplan decide to do. Glenn, regarding that $83 million payment, it does look like Trump, to your point, was able to secure that bond from a subsidiary of Chubb Insurance Company. On their part, why take such a risky bet given how over-leveraged Donald Trump is?
I assume it's not a risky bet. And here's why I say that. This is a mega insurance company that has decided to step up and give Donald Trump a bond. I would question why anybody would want to sort of step in and try to assist Donald Trump like that. I think I know the answer. It's money. This insurance company must believe that whatever collateral Donald Trump pledged to secure the loan, we don't know what that collateral is sufficient for them to be comfortable that there's going to be a pot of money at the end of the day whereby, one, they will get their payment for stepping up and providing the bond, being the insurer, ensuring that Donald Trump will pay out if he loses the appeal, and that there will be enough to satisfy the money judgment that will have to be paid out to E Jean Carroll. So let me just give you an example. Let's assume Donald Trump has a piece of property that's worth $1 billion and it's unencumbered, no mortgage on it. I question whether he's got any property like that, but for hypothetical reasons, let's assume he does. He could provisionally sign over the deed to that $1 million property to the insurer, who then puts up a bond. And if need be, that $1 billion property will become the property. It would be owned by the insurer. So listen, this insurance company, I'm quite sure, did its homework, knew that it was, one, going to make a profit, two, there was going to be enough to pay out the judgment at the end of the day. And that's probably why they were willing to step up and assist Donald Trump in posting this bond.
Glenn, I want to pose like kind of a scenario to you. Is it possible that they made what they think is a smart calculation in basically putting themselves out there to for this $91 million bond, and then kind of calculating that in the event that Donald Trump takes power again as the president of the United States, well, now they basically own the next president of the United States by virtue of kind of sticking their necks out for him and posting this bond on his behalf?
A president being beholden to anyone financially. I don't care if it's legitimate banks and institutions, it's foreign governments, it's insurers and bondsmen who, have put their necks on the line for Donald Trump. I think that poses a danger of a president's loyalties being split, perhaps at best, or the loyalties running to the people that own him financially at worst.
Right.
so that he's making decisions not based on what's in the best interest of the American people, but what is in the best interest of Donald Trump. Shocking that that's the way he would operate, caring more about his own interests, like on January 6th, than the interests of the American voters who rejected him as president, and he didn't care. He tried to criminally and unconstitutionally override the expressed will of the American voters, because that's who Donald Trump is.
Yeah, and that should probably serve as the biggest warning to folks as we move forward in this election, that this is who he's shown himself to be. And, with insurance companies like this who are doing these kinds of deals, it would prove yet again, if that turned out to be the case, that, yet again, he's putting his own personal interests above that of what would be the American people. So with that said, we'll obviously stay on top of this as soon as we get any updates. For those watching right now, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.